Thank you, Judy, and I just wanted to say my own personal welcome to Doug and to Art. And I assume, since this is an evening with Doug and Art and myself, it's going to be fairly free-flowing. And I would very much like to see if we could in some way pin down what on earth have we been doing all these years? What is psychoanalysis? Why does it work? What does it mean when you look at it, when you've been working on it for years? Has it changed? Does it grow? Does it mutate? What are we doing?
I feel so honored having two people here who would not be called rubbernecks. They have their own way, their own style. And though they have been with me for many years, they have found their own path and their own individuality. So since I'm 84 years old, and I've been a member or a student since 1962, I think it is time. I am going to make a confession. I never passed final presentation. It was my double. My double knew all the things to say before the committee. I think that double should have gotten an Academy Award. He rehearsed and so forth, so he looked like he knew what he was doing. But he's shrewd. Sometimes he even crops up today, and he may even be here tonight, because I don't know about this double who says what he's supposed to say and not who he really is. And sometimes it's very confusing. I am sure I have even confused you two.
No.
Anyway, I've asked both of them to be here, and I particularly have asked Alice, who knows what question I'm going to ask her. She's been with me for years, and every week she goes also to Margman Bergman's seminar. Now, how does she combine Margman Bergman and Art Robbins in the same week without getting analytic indigestion? So, if you please, can you clarify this? Because I've never understood it.
Well, to begin with, I want you to know I've been asked this question yearly for at least 30 years, and I have never been able to give an answer. Is this on?
Yes. Yes.
And it's true. And just for the record, Martin is still working, and he is going to be 100 in a month.
Oh, wow.
And I have been extremely lucky in my two teachers. They have allowed dimensions to grow in me that I am very grateful for. So just as an overview, I still don't have an answer to it except some kind of deep running conversation that began over 30 years ago and is still ongoing. And I see a number of people nodding because I think I'm not the only one who has swum in those two rivers. And
did you ever present the same case
Yes.
in Martin's case
oh
in
yes,
mine?
absolutely.
And
Yes.
you never told me.
Well, I'm telling you now. Yes, I did. And Lord, first of all, what I want to say is that both of these men have changed so in the time that I've had with them.
Both him
Both Art
and his double.
and Martin and his double. His double probably stayed the same. But the thing that's most striking is that I think there's been a superego change. And Martin in particular was, we were in a very patriarchal, men with antlers clashing each other for years as I experienced analysis. And something has changed. It is more embracing, more feminine, I don't know. But both these men and art in particular are so open and so able to grow. Maybe it's because trauma has entered the conversation. I don't know what it is, but both, I would say art in particular, has been able to take all the boats coming down the river and unload the cargo and make kind of a richer and richer and richer tool that we work with. Martin did something when he was maybe 90. When together we were reading Thomas Ogden. He said, to me it doesn't seem like it adds very much. In fact, I don't really believe this third space. He said, but why don't we try an experiment? And so we brought in a case or a session, and we talked about our free associations. And he said, you know what? He does have something to offer. So Martin is a scientist in a way, and I think he probably is a little more discouraged about analysis and where it's going. And so Martin, I would say, was more theory. You build on theory, you take classic theory, you make it work for you somehow. He has some capacity for seeing how the psyche works that is remarkable. And I would say every time I go there, I still say, how does he do it? I can't possibly do that. With art, what I would say is I can feel parts of me growing and being responded to. And I feel like if I present a case, we share we share instincts, intuitions, and this is not to say he isn't grounded in classical. He is formidably so. But he can flow with my way of thinking and others' way of thinking and help it take a shape and a form. This probably still doesn't answer the question. I've been trying to answer it 30 different times in 30 different ways over the years.
Well, let me respond to that. Firstly, it supports what I believe, and that is that what theory you use, what technique you use, depends so much on the history of the patient and the therapist, two people. And that sometimes theory, for me, is discovered in the experience. That you don't bring in to the relationship a built-in theory, but that doesn't mean that you are deeply trained. In fact, all the material that you learn in NPAP that you forget, hopefully someday becomes part of your body. Not your head, but your body. So that theory is in your body. And people have different receptivity to take in different types of bodily experiences. And through what I call a flow, or what I am, when you talked about Ogden and the third space, well, this is touching on the very basis of how I work. Because I believe that an analytic stance or analysis, which probably is not defended, which not is talked about in any book has two basic ingredients. You are separate and yet you are one with your patients. And if you could be in both states at the same time, you are an analyst. That means you have the ability to be in two mental states and do that integration. It is also what happens to an artist. And I believe that psychoanalysis is an art form. And though we use certain scientific data, I respect all the material that's coming from brain research, from infant-child observation. They're important. They become part of my ground. They are in me so that I know them in my gut. But at the same time, how I use myself and open myself up depends on one thing, which is kind of tricky to describe. Is my field of perception open, and can I pick up the nonverbal cues that are going on between that patient and myself? Because the unconscious is in the body, and we make body-to-body contact. We may not think we are doing it. We may not know we are doing it, but we always are doing it. And that the basis of psychoanalysis is dealing with the unconscious, which means dealing with the body. That doesn't mean that it stays there. But what happens is that when you are picking up facial expressions, people who are writing notes, like my friend who I want to tell her, put down the lousy notes, you know it already. When I see people looking at me with different ways of looking, sitting, I'm picking up nonverbal sensory motor cues, and they're touching bodily contacts in me. Now that brings up a certain kind of energy. Or it doesn't. Sometimes there's no energy in the room, and sometimes the energy is chaotic. But sometimes there is a flow. And you had asked me on the phone or told me, how come I make certain kinds of interventions and when? That is part of my ability to pick up the flow and follow it. I create an intervention by producing a form into this energy when it facilitates that flow of energy. Now you may say, what the hell are you talking about? Are you talking about libido? What is this energy? I will go and say, have you met somebody where there's no chemistry? The guy is so nice, he's so sweet, but there's no chemistry. It's these louses that I get involved with. Why? There's something energetic that happens between that person and myself that mobilizes that connection. Okay, well, have you worked, those of you who, most of you who see patients, where the person is coming down the hallway and your eyes close. You haven't even seen the person and your eyes are closing. There's nothing playing. And then your job, which is the art form, is how do I create the energy? Which means I have to tool into the body and see where the body communication is. And then my art form is, what do I do with it? Do I share it? Do I keep it to myself? Do I allude to it? All that is part of seeing what I can do to get the energy flowing. But if the energy is flowing, most part will keep quiet. But somewhere, sometimes, the energy stops. And you mentioned that in the last 10 years, trauma has been a big deal. Well, quite often, the trauma can't be dealt with interpersonally or transference and counter-transference because it's too hot. Because it will mean that the boundaries get recreated which are broken. So you look and discover the transitional object. Well, what the hell does that mean? There is a piece that a person gets involved with, most people, where their unconscious gets involved with. And there's where you meet. Now, you were in a group that was pretty defended. Where did they get alive? When we spoke about politics. Then a murder came out, incest, collusion, all the wonderful things of the unconscious came out through the medium of politics, but we couldn't deal with it because it was too hot to handle directly. Now, sitting next to me, I first met him. I said, what the hell is a lawyer going to do in my group? I hate lawyers. But he says he's a reformed lawyer. He's left the legal profession. Well, that's something. He's healthy to do that. But something strange happens. I develop a deep fondness for him, and I don't understand why. And then I understand that he's deeply involved with aesthetics. My God. I wrote a whole book on something called psychoaesthetics. A book that was an instant success. It lasted 30 days and the publishing house closed down. However, the term psychoaesthetics still goes on because I think that what goes on in that space is an art form. And when I speak of aesthetics, we never have spoken about this, so this is our time. We never speak about aesthetics directly. He has his wonderful course, and he's the expert, and I have the chutzpah to talk about aesthetics psychically. So, my definition of aesthetics is that when the inanimate becomes alive, and when there is more than just words, but the words become transformative in nature. And that the space between becomes alive, and how you work that space is an aesthetic experience. That means the space may be too dense and needs some balance, or it may be too chaotic, so it needs a frame, or it needs much more stimulation. But all the things, my wife, who would look and be my critic, my newest piece, she would say, it's dead over here and it's flat over there. Do something. And I understood we were talking about the movement of an art form and whether it becomes alive. Well, all the ingredients of aesthetics that are part of art are part of an analytic relationship and are mediated between two people. So what do you think?
Well, I think that's very true. Let me just start by saying that
Yeah, it's on. It's on.
It's on.
That I also have been with art for 30 years at this point. And when I started with art, I was in training, in the middle of training. And shortly after having started with art, I became the head of MITO. And with that, I had to sit on the board. And one of Art's first statements to me was, in the group, I'm so glad you're going to be on the board. When I get crazy, you tell me. And I came to understand that, both for him and for me, over the years. And also one of the first lessons, technical lessons, that Art told me, and this took a while to grasp, but it was very significant, and that was that one can really close one's eyes, put your hand over your face, sit back, seem like you're totally out of it, and you'll be completely in it. And that's what art does. In terms of the aesthetics, it was an evolving process. I had been, in my training analysis, was 4 and 5 times a week, a quite classical process. And as Art said, I'd come out of law previously. And I was just finding my own aesthetic self, my visceral self in art. And it took me any number of years in Art's group to really understand and mitigate what that meant.